Hello, everyone. Welcome to Reflections on a Turbulent Year in a Conversation with Journalists. Hello, our dear Steph. How are you?
Hi Sandra, how are you?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for everyone who is watching us right now. Here in Colombia is 5 a.m. What is the hour over there?
It's 7 a.m. So yes, good morning.
Super, super early for us, but of course it's midday for you. I would like to tell you that Ashley wasn't able to be with us, but she is a culture writer in New York, in addition to writing a weekly column about women and games for The Strike. She has writing about video games and technology for sites like The Verge, Woker, and Inverse, where she is an assistant reporter. Ashley is graduated from the University of Rochester in 2020 with two BA degrees and creative writing and brain in cognitive science. So we're really sorry to not she's not part of this, but we're really happy also to have here Steph to talk about a lot of topics that we like to address in mass media. So why don't you talk a little bit about yourself, Steph, so we know more about and the panelists know more about us.
I find it hard to talk about myself being a journalist. I'm very used to be the one doing the questions.
Yes, I
Um, uh,
understand.
yeah, it's difficult. But hello, you already said that my name is Stephanie Zuccarelli. I'm an Argentinian journalist. I specialize in gaming and gaming industry. Started like well, I'm very interested in game studies, so I'm trying to get into Argentinian media agenda, video games as a cultural object. Generally work for national mainstream media such as Página 12, IP Noticias, Vorterix. I also do collaborations for the local Rolling Stone. So yeah, it's been a trip. I do podcast. I'm basically a journalist of all sorts, trying to spread the love of what a gaming industry is when there is love to spread, of course.
Well, in my case, I'm a journalist too, more like a political communicator. I'm a master in communication as a political communicator. I've been in the game dev industry for the last 5 years, working more like to make awareness of the game dev industry, the indie game dev industry of Colombia and Latin America. I've been able to create a community of game developers called Tan Grande y Jugando, which works a lot to promote the game dev industry, not just as in communication and journalism, but giving tools to like democratization of the information to have that ability and to have that kind of superpower to others that need that. I work also making investigations like about the game dev industry. I really love public policy. I like to see how governments prepare themselves for the growth of these kind of industries, and not just the governments, also universities, other studios. I The last thing super epic that happened as a journalist was that one of my investigations was published in an encyclopedia of video games by Mark Wolf. He's the editor of that content, and it has like an investigation of 100 countries. And I was able to write for two chapters, Colombia and Uruguay. So I feel really honored to be part of that, and I love the way that it went because it has changed a lot since I wrote those chapters, and it just means the things that we have been doing, it's been like growing up all the game dev industry. So you know a little bit more about our journalist backgrounds, you know a little bit more about what we do in the game dev industry. So let's take now the things in our hands, and we are now going to talk about something that is pretty serious and that we like to address as a in terms of what is a good way to make journalism work for the things that we are like now having problems with. And I of course, not as a journalist we have that kind of problem. Our what we need to do is always to address these kinds of situations every time it happens. But what we need to do now is to see the best way to communicate this and to spread the word, but not just to say this is happening, but also to look solutions and to make a community around that. What do you think about that, Steph?
Well, I think it's key because we are specializing in video games to understand how our industry is developed. We are in a very similar type of industry here in Argentina, in Uruguay, well, all of Latin America. So we understand that one of the main things that we have to strengthen is our community because there's a huge market for Latin America talent, but there is not enough, let's say, trust in
Yeah.
ourselves, even though that might sound like a little bit naive, but trust in the inside market to start a really huge movement of products, being that video games here
Mm.
in the general Latin America market. So I think that as people that specialize in communication, it's our responsibility to start saying, okay, this is the general panorama, and we can start building things from here. Because I think, I don't know if you feel that, well, probably you feel it this way, Sandra, but we are in a very strange place of the video game development change, we can say.
Yeah.
There are lots of people that say, okay, but you're not really part of this industry because you're
Yeah.
just either reviewing or studying or making articles
Yeah,
about.
you're not making games, no, like.
Exactly, you're not coding or making the animations or things like that, or you're not even PR, which is
Hmm.
it's also our job to say, but if you don't have people talking about it, nobody's going to know.
And I would say like also the game developers forget that we exist and that we need this kind of information to be really clear for us, because when you are giving us the inside of your game, you're just like, hey, I make a game, and you put that on there, and we're like, what do you want me to do with these? Put it like in a more clear information for us to have the opportunity to taste your game in a super easy way, and to have it in a condition that you know that we are going to work with that in the best way that we have. And my camera just pop up. Eh. It's my computer. It's so excited to be part
Don't
of
worry,
this
I
chat.
can see you, so I think that
Okay,
we're on.
it works. So at the end of the day, we need super clear communication, and we are part of the game dev industry. Even sometimes we are not recognized being part, and even so, because we are these kind of bloggers that are not part of the big media, we are sometimes being forgotten by all of the content generators that we have. But of course, things have been changing a lot for the last 3 years, I would say, because thanks to, and sadly to, the pandemic that we're living right now. And of course, it is kind of a topic that we usually don't address in terms of how it is so difficult for us to get the information, because it is our job to be part of that investigation, to know more about how to find that content and that quality content that's going to change the view of a new creator. But let's talk about that other content that's been spreading a lot for the last years, and it is a content that we I do believe that we don't only need to address as a woman in games organization or advocates or media. I feel like it's a content that we need to address in terms of all what we are working on now, and it is of course how violence inside the game dev industry again towards women, it's being like a really hard part. I would like to say first that we have to address the participation of women inside the game dev industry. In Colombia and in Latin America, we have only the 5% of the total of the game dev industry is female related. In Europe, we calculated that it is the 24% of the industry that are women, and for the United States, we consider that it is at least the 25-26%. So we are not having a lot of participation of women inside the game dev industry, and that's also probably because of the contents that how we grow up, because we have this kind of media interpretation when women were weak. But it is not just about video games, it is about all the narratives that we have. For example, like we have it in how do you say it, in movies and in radio and in all these kind of places that were really were to talking about the weakness of women when we are clearly not weak at all. No, like we've been working for a long time doing a lot of epic stuff, but we're not recognized, and that's super sad.
It is a common narrative because I think it might be a comfortable place for older generations, or well, I'm not going to blame older generations. Let's say much more conservative points of view. They know that they work in the marketplace. They know that it's comfortable to have a princess that is always in another castle to talk about Super Mario. But it's not comfortable, and it might be a gamble for them to start thinking through a female perspective. Because, well, this is a really hot topic here in Argentina right now. Women written by male writers, it might be something like women characters that are written the same as male characters, where the perspective changes a lot. Because well, in the world that we live in, it's a whole different idea. It's a whole different world. So it kind of gets eliminated from the different types of cultural narrative. What is the reality of women in general in the whole world, which is crazy because you might analyze one country and say, okay, this is something that happens because, I don't know, some type of cultural reason, but it's not. Here in Argentina, we have two very specific laws addressing gender and gender identity. One of them is Ley Micaela, which talks about, I'm going to explain it, in the big picture here, but it's trying to give a general training on how to address different female gender and different perspectives around gender. And the other law, it's a gender and identity law, which also addresses how to speak about and work around understanding the identity of different people. And I published an investigation last year in Página 12, where I talked to several of the biggest developers here in Argentina about this type of policies. And they told me that, of course, it's something very important, but it's not a priority for them, which is something pretty crazy, because it's like, it's not a priority for you to start handling your personal like human beings.
Hmm.
That sounds crazy, you know. I know you might not consider putting in a pipeline, you know. We have to talk about this. We have to start thinking about how to address certain subjects, certain narratives or perspectives. But I think that it has to be embedded in ourselves
Total.
to know how to treat the other person. And when we learn to do that, we learn how to create narratives, real narratives for everyone.
Hmm. Oof, and that's something that journalists used to forget. Like when we have a new way, a new project, we forget the way that the characters have been narrated. Maybe it is so because it is also a male-dominated industry of for us. The journalism inside the game dev industry is also male-dominated because of our cultural heritage, of course. And that's something that they don't recognize in terms because they have never felt the weight of being a step into another place like it, as you can say, it's not their priority because they don't see the problem because they don't live that kind of problem all the time.
They haven't
So
been questioned.
yeah, they never thought about their own privileges to start to dig. Like I have noticed that the default character of all these games are male, like that. Like and that's a journalist question about like how many games have that kind of default, and to address that, like what is happening, who is making games, why are we making games like this, and not in terms to say like why are we making game, like being a male character is not wrong, of course it's not, but just to understand that we are the 51% of the population and we are in the representation of games like the 5% is really sad. So and when I say not because we don't have female leaders inside the games, just imagine the scenarios when you have this kind of superpower female leading all this job and everything, but all the characters, the extra characters, evil guys, even the one that's selling the fruit is a male character. That's something that
Well,
we forgot too as a media.
yes, and I think that we forgot how to question that because I don't know if this is true for every country, but please let me know how do you feel in your specialized niches. But I think that lots of video game studios are very susceptible to these questions because they feel like they are being attacked,
Judge, they're being
and that is
judged. Like, but
exactly because
I am not sexualist. I'm not male dominant. We call it here espalda plateada, pecho peludo, which means like a super alpha male. Like we're not that
yeah,
kind
we
of
call
guys.
them
We're
here
good guys.
machitos.
Yeah. Okay.
They're like so very well. I can understand in an objective point of view that you are now against lots of questions about, okay, let's start thinking about different perspectives that we have had from, you know, years and years. And to make that type of deconstruction might seem like a lot to handle.
Yeah.
But it's
And it
part
is
of
happened too
being,
fast.
yeah, but it's part of human evolution, we can say. But I also think that it might be like a natural response of being a niche market. We haven't we haven't built a strong community where these type of questions
Are
are
made.
normal.
Yeah. Yeah, we that's something that we can address as media because as media, we are entitled to make these awareness, as I was telling you before. Like, as a journalist, our job is also to let people make the questions too. Like, we have not just to present the cases, we have to make them think also, like, what is happening here and how can I as a citizen make this better, not just like everything is going to die. That's the
Yeah.
kind of media that we find here in Latin America a lot. Like, you see the news and you're going to be really depressed after you finish the news, because oof, it is super hard to see. And sometimes for that content, we are seeing that in the same measure for our community of game developers. We have to address now the sexual violence we have been living for the women in games community. And of course, we it is something that we have to say now. Of course, we knew this could happen. We didn't know any cases before, but it doesn't mean that it was the first time that it happened. What I am trying to say is, like, the game dev industry is not different from other industries. We've saw the movement Me Too, and oh, Señor Gato, how are you?
Yeah, it's I call them cat technical difficulties when they like to pop up from nowhere.
And move everything.
Yeah, move everything. Yes, I'm sorry. You were saying because I find that I quote you. I think in my last podcast because I think this is a.
Oh,
I said yes. Sandra Castro Pinzon talk about why we haven't had a Me Too movement
about the game dev
video game.
industry.
Yeah.
Yes, like, and it is not only like, of course, we know the cases of Harvey Weinstein, but we know that also that wasn't like kind of something new for us. As a mass media, we already knew that this was happening. It's different when someone it is taking the voice and saying, you know what, me too. It's happened to me, and someone else is going to back that person too. We haven't saw that on the video game industry, and of course it's something that I do have to blame myself. Like, what can I do? What are the tools as me as a journalist to keep on working and make the awareness of that topic, but also to prevent this from happening again? And in those terms, like, how we can as a journalist work this out,
Well,
because this is not new.
yes.
How, what can we do?
Um, I think that because, of course, we know about the several cases, even that happened last week, about lots of game studios, uh, pretty big game studios, that all of the sudden they realize that they have been having like this toxic masculinity cultural in their workplace, you know, and it's a surprise and now they want to make everything all right. But I think it's presented like isolated cases. Okay,
Yes.
now this is happening in another company. Oh, such a surprise because we thought they were all great guys,
Mm.
and I think that is something that I'm going to blame. I'm going to blame journalism in general, me too, of course. That I think that we might not be seeing these this like a general subject. We need
Should
that
it be,
name like Me Too in gaming.
yeah, like, should it be like blame for the journalists because their job is to be part of, like, look of the games, and they're not paying attention to people? Could that be the problem?
Like they are too into
Into
not
games.
even as analyzing as a cultural object, but
Hmm.
reviewing articles. Let's talk about the technical aspects. We are now currently trying to handle a new generation of consoles, which
Y-
seems to be. a little bit adrift.
Yeah, because we usually as me being seeing other journalists is like the content that we publish is all like game consume related more than and that's something that I realized because I am specialized in game dev content related. I want to know the team. I want to know the story about that. I want to know how many time, how many people, where they make this, where they spot ideas, where that's the kind of content that I like to address. But that's not something that we find all the time in the contents of video games. And a lot of media is specialized in making these kind of contents of games, like to know what's the character made of, the story, the line, the narrative, the mechanics, and they're just thinking about the game. And maybe these are the journalists that are at the same time addressing that problem, which is like I have never thought before about the game developer team that was part of this. And now I'm addressing to this topic that it is new for me. Would be that the problem? And
I think so. Well, for example, I work in general media, and the first thing that, uh, first of all, it's like I'm the only gaming specialist in the whole floor. We are like 20 journalists, lots
you're
of
a unicorn there.
yeah, of course. Plus, I have blue hair, so they know that. Okay, yeah, this is the video game girl. Yeah, exactly. I'm almost 30. Yes, I'm still a girl. You know, and that's a mentality that we are going to solve the world in another chapter. But we have 20 journalists. Lots of are dedicated to politics. Lots are dedicated to culture like movies, music, and they are always trying to address that. And they know, in this very subtle way that uh, you can ask someone in video games. Well, the only question they ask is really is it real that is a really toxic place for women?
Hmm.
Which I always answer, it's not video games. But
Hmm.
video games is such the reflection because it's a cultural object. We're talking about the whole society here. And we have to, as writers, as analysts, and as, well, journalists, we have to take a step back
Hmm.
because there are lots of things happening that are consequences of the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I think that we have been really interested in how things are made because you mentioned it before. We have been in an exponential growth, but in a very little, in a limited margin of time, the pandemic. Suddenly, everyone knows about video games because they wanted to keep
Yes,
saying
OMS has to say like this is good. I know it's who organization says like woo,
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
like we advise you to
Video games are good for you.
video
Oh,
game.
okay,
Yeah,
then I'm going to do it. We were
yeah.
always doing it because but yeah, and when they're trying to address it in general media, uh it's always here in Argentina we have
Yeah.
a famous case of I don't know what they wanted to do,
Hmm.
but it was in 2019. They tried to say that Fortnite possessed people, possessed as in a demonic
Oh
possession.
my God. Okay.
And they were journalists. They were not like I grabbed someone
Yeah, like
walking
some
in the street
i-
and okay,
mm,
tell me about video
quote
games.
or
No,
some. No. Oh my God. Okay.
they were too far away from
Yeah.
from the industry. You have to take a step back, but not all the way back. You have to start thinking. It's 2021. It's not the future. It's right now. We have, let's say, almost 50 years of gaming industry history. Let's talk about the things that we are building on. What are the
Yeah.
roots? Because those are the real causes of lots of things that we need to change or we need to address.
Yes, it is. I just remember a tweet, and I see that Beatriz has also remembered that tweet. And thank you, Beatriz, because you just put it like I was just looking here. And the tweet says something like, "How do we get women into games? It's not just about that. It's also how do we get misogynists out of games." And that is something that hasn't been mentioned about mass media in any terms. And I just want to recall all the team, all the people that's here. If you want more answers, remember that put on the QA section your questions, and we're going to be address this in the right in the writing section that we're going to create for you guys. So put there your questions, put there your comments, and we'll be so happy to be part of this content, of course. And okay, so let's keep on this kind of content. And I do responsibilize a lot of media, but I also responsibilize a lot of our inner voice. What are we going to do? And I am not just addressing Zuccarelli, I am also addressing us as a community, as a woman in games community, because we have these companies will have this problem because they don't know how to address it. But it is in us as a game dev community, is in us as women working the promotion of other women inside the game dev industry, the things that we can do, the things that we can change, how we can manage to take our next generation and to be in those positions. And of course, saying that and making you the homework like, yeah, you have to do that, and not giving you the tools would be like really awful for me, like a really bad human being.
It's the
But
way we are raised, and we
yeah,
don't want anyone to to
yeah,
go to the same thing again.
of course. So what I've been working here, not just as a journalist, is I am investigating all the cases of bad behavior of the companies in my country and seeing how we can arrange that. Sometimes this kind of content, it is a really it has a lot of unpopular opinions when you are hiring, because of course you are hiring, and so the people want to have a super fast answer of how I went in my how I went my portfolio. How do you see my CV? I am going to have this interview. I'm not going to have that, and we haven't yet have these cases of sexual abuse here in Colombian industry. But I would be like super open to all that kind of knowledge to know how to address it. But I've been like looking what is the companies, what are they doing wrong, and sometimes it is because they have this lack of personal insight, that they don't know how, like the same person that it is the human office, the human talent office, it is the same person that is making the scripts. So it's like that happened here. But of course there is no excuse for big companies that have a lot of budget for having a human resources department with all the content. But at the same time, because they haven't addressed that topic, they don't know how to do that. Just let's just remember how COVID started, and our doctors didn't know anything about that. And we have to start to learn in the March. What are we going to do? This is not new. This is something that's been happening in other industries. And I would like that we address the movie industry and the movement Me Too for that kind of content. And of course, to let them see how that is going to make you in a place where you're not going to have to be afraid for anything or nothing. Yesterday I was in a video recording with a team of women that were part of different games. I hope later I can post you the content. But in one of the stories that they told us, she remembered me a story here. Well, the story was that her friend was sexually harassed by some co-worker there, and when she make that announcement, of course he was removed from her job, from his job, sorry. But the thing was that at the end, he was an important part of the game dev team, of course. And later her boss addressed her like, we don't have a designer because you spoke up. So that's of course something that we have to make stop. Like that cannot happen in
No,
any
you don't
way.
have a designer because you don't know how to hire people. That's
Yeah.
the thing.
Like, oof,
Stop
but
blaming the victim because you
yes,
don't know how to
yes,
make a correct. Well, as you said, the same guy that it's coding might be the human resources
resources guy.
person, which is it's mildly infuriating. I can
A
say that.
lot, a
Yeah.
lot. Oh,
Um,
and
you know,
how we can address that, and not just by the topic, like he said that, she said that, and he said other things like that. But like we have to make this kind of investigation that let us know the correct way to address these kind of topics, and never to put them behind, never to blame the victim for any reason. Like,
well,
no.
we had a last year. I tried to contact her, but of course, uh, she wasn't really ready to
Spoke
speak
up.
about this. Yeah,
Yeah.
but there was a woman that was hired to be like the public face of a pretty big company in an international level. And she was so
From Brazil.
excited. She was an influencer, exactly, from
Yeah.
Brazil.
Oh, these cases.
She was going to be the hostess for every public event, etc. And she was her, I don't know if it was everything was online, but she was harassed so
Yeah.
badly that she spoke up or tried to communicate to the
With
company.
her
And the
company.
answer of the company was, okay, let's fire you because evidently the problem is that you are here, not the people that are violent towards you. And lots of people in the mainstream start talking about, okay, this is an example of toxic masculinity in video games,
Yes.
and how this is a very dangerous place to be, to start, don't bring your kids into video games because you might have a misogynistic
Yeah.
person in the making, which is not, it's not the correct focus. Again, we have
No, it's
to
not.
think about video games as a reflection of
Our society, our
our
narrative,
society as a
our
whole,
content.
because
Mm.
of course that is not the correct answer, and it's
Yes.
not the correct way. And what we can say, I'm a little bit divided because as a journalist I find it pretty interesting and I want to
Mm.
investigate about that. As a human being, I find it pretty disturbing that this is an international company
Infuriating.
that doesn't know how to
Infuriating.
treat
Yes. And
handle this type of situation.
I have a group here in Colombia, which is Colombia Women in Games, and we address that kind of topics. And these girls start like to have some tools or some topics of conversation to have in their own companies, because the companies are not going to have those conversations alone. We have to bring those conversations to the table and to see like, this is happening, how are we going to address that? because, well, we're going to be harassed forever and ever, because internet makes you the possibility to have this anonymity that's really dangerous from sometimes, and it is really also like healing for you in sometimes, though. um, but nobody is going to take that type of content and put it on the CEO level, like just to be in if we make, as a journalist, we make a good job and we create this kind of super content that's really good for us. No, like for example, we are going to address this content that's super epic news about how to address these topics. It's not going to go to the CEO level if you don't put it there. As also, we need to address this kind of movements, and I want to invite you to keep on this kind of how we should, like, keep on mind, keep it on the top of mind, make that awareness to be working all the time.
Set that agenda, like something that
Yes,
it's normal to ask, which is
yes,
which I
set the
think it
agenda.
must be normal to ask, but with different types of uh, main points, not always
Mm.
make it like a scandal, like, oh, this is something
Yeah.
very weird to happen. Let's talk about how people are evil in these, like in a very naive type of way. But to say, okay, the agenda is, let's talk about gender and gender equality, and
Yes.
let's talk about how studios treat their personnel. I'm currently writing about esports, football here in Argentina, and I think in all Latin America and in Great Britain, it's pretty big. And they are starting to hire major leagues are starting to hire these esport players, female esport players, which are really young because they tend to be. And I'm really concerned about the policies, about um, how are they going to handle any type of mistreatment to their players, because major leagues here, at least, they are not well known to handle gender policy uh,
Hmm.
greatly. Let's put it
Hmm.
that way. We're going to address that. We have a satellite event of Women in Games Argentina on Friday, and we are going to try to address that with a journalist that is specialized in esports and in FIFA in particular. Um, because it has come to my attention that, okay, we have like this new generation that wants to bet everything on something that it's their passion. And what if they are encounter, I hope they never do, but for personal and general experience, that we know that they might encounter these type of things,
Hmm.
how is the environment going to react to protect them?
How's going to be addressed?
Exactly.
How are we going to talk about it? Is she's going to be in danger? We have a super scandal about sexual abuse, not in esports but in sports here, and that's also an industry that's really harsh on women. And because it is this kind of super masculine industry, and we forgot these are humans, and we forgot that this is not a content about just your medals or your competition. We have to address the human health of and the mental health of these persons. And that's something that we can do. Like, I know that we are the journalists here, but if you are watching this, you are already like making part of the movement. All the things that you do are political, and just watching this is also a political statement about like what we can do here and what we can work now. And we have to start this kind of new movement for us, for the game dev industry, for women in games, for all the organizations that are working in other content. And of course, see also the good news that we are promoting the game dev industry. We are promoting the inclusion of girls and women inside the game dev industry, and we have new ambassadors, and we have new content there that's like being like growing up a lot. I have a lot of hope in this industry, really. And saying all that, I'm wrapping up this conversation, reflections on a turbulent year in a conversation of journalism. And thank you very, very much for everyone that's watching us. Thank you, Suki, for being here in this event. And thank you, Woman
Thank
in
you for
Gaming.
inviting me.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be with you.